Have you ever stopped to think that learning English might be easier than you think? What if I told you that you don't need boring classes or spending hours studying grammar to speak English fluently? It seems impossible, right? But believe me, you can achieve fluency just by watching content you already love. That's right. Movies, series, music, even game videos. All of this can be the key to speaking English naturally and effortlessly. Now, imagine the feeling of understanding a series without needing subtitles, or even starting to converse in English with confidence, without the fear of making mistakes. This is how you will feel when you apply the secret I am going to tell you here. If you are ready to learn English in a practical and fun way, without having to open books or attend traditional classes, subscribe to our channel now. Don't miss any tips, tricks, or strategies that will accelerate your learning and put you on the path to fluency naturally. Click the subscribe button and activate the bell to be notified whenever we have new videos that will transform the way you learn English. Join our community and start your journey to fluent English today. In this video, we will unveil a simple but powerful method for learning English in a fun and engaging way. No heavy books or formal classes. You will learn English while having fun and consuming the content you already love, all in a natural and intuitive way. It doesn't matter if you're a fan of series, films, or even game videos. Learning English can be more fluid than you think. So, if you are tired of traditional methods, this is the time to change your learning process. Let's discover together how, by immersing yourself in English in a relaxed way, you can achieve fluency in a fun, practical, and much more effective way than you imagined. The truth is that many of us have already tried to learn English through traditional methods, grammar, books, vocabulary exercises, and those endless hours of studying that seem more like torture than a form of learning. How many times have you found yourself unmotivated, looking at the pages of a book, trying to memorize complex rules or words that have nothing to do with real life? The problem with learning English this way is simple. It's not connected to how we actually use the language in everyday life. Learning words and rules without real context makes the experience mechanical, almost like homework that you never finish. It's no wonder that many end up abandoning learning, because the process becomes repetitive, boring, and, above all, frustrating. I know how difficult it is to face the study of a language when it is seen as something distant and disconnected from our reality. You're stuck in a classroom, memorizing vocabulary lists, without ever actually using the language to converse or understand a movie. The feeling of not evolving and not being able to apply what you learned makes motivation disappear over time. And believe me, this is not your fault. The traditional teaching method is simply not designed to teach in a fun or engaging way. But what if I told you that there was a way to learn English that eliminates these frustrations? Something that not only solves the monotony of books, but also allows you to have fun while learning, absorbing the language in a much more natural way. Now, imagine that, instead of fighting a lifeless list of rules and vocabulary, you could simply watch a series or movie you like and learn English automatically, without even realizing it. This is what we will explore from now on. Now that we've talked about the challenges of traditional methods, let's take a step forward and look at what really works when it comes to learning a new language. The answer is simple: immersion. Immersion in the language, something you probably experience every day without even realizing it, is the key to natural and lasting learning. But what exactly does this mean, and how can you use it to your advantage? Immersion is basically surrounding yourself with the language in such a way that it becomes part of your everyday life. Unlike traditional methods, where you need to sit down and study rules and vocabulary, immersion happens spontaneously. And best of all, you learn without even feeling like you're studying. This is what makes learning English so fun and effective. But how do you immerse yourself in English in a way that is enjoyable, without the pressure of a book or a scoreboard? This is where the power of entertainment comes in. Films, series, music, and even YouTube videos are the ideal tools to help you in this immersion process. They bring English into your everyday life in a way that is practical, fun, and, most importantly, with real vocabulary used by native speakers in everyday situations. By watching this content, you not only learn words and phrases, but you also understand the context in which they are used, which is essential for authentic communication. Imagine watching a series like Stranger Things. It's not only a great form of entertainment, but an opportunity to learn how natives really speak, with informal expressions, slang, and even different accents. Additionally, you learn about the culture, references, and interactions that happen on a daily basis. This is much more effective than learning isolated words from a book. The difference here is context. When you hear a word or phrase being said in a scene, you understand it based on what's happening, which makes learning much more meaningful. Immersion also has another great benefit. It activates different areas of your brain. When you are watching a movie or listening to music, you are processing information not only on a linguistic level, but also on an emotional and cognitive level. You begin to associate words with emotions, situations, and even images, creating a network of connections that make the language easier to remember. This multidimensional approach to learning is what makes the process much more intuitive and effective. Let's take an example. When listening to the song Shape of You by Ed Sheeran, you are not only learning vocabulary, but also understanding the melody, the emotions behind the lyrics, and even the images that the song evokes. You connect emotionally with words, and this creates a much stronger memory than just memorizing vocabulary lists. Not to mention that, when singing the songs, you are also training your pronunciation and fluency without even realizing it. The beauty of entertainment immersion is that it is 100% customizable. You can choose the content you like most, whether it's an action series, a soap opera, a comedy film, or even a video game. The important thing is that, when watching or listening, you are absorbing the language in a natural, fun way and without the pressure of formal study. And if you still think that this technique is not enough to achieve fluency, it's good to remember that many language teaching experts, such as Stephen Crayshon, argue that immersion is one of the most effective ways to learn. Crayshon even suggests that natural understanding of the language occurs when you are exposed to content that is slightly above your level of understanding, which is exactly what happens when you start watching content in English. Now, the question is, how can you start applying this in your daily life? The answer is simpler than it seems. Start small. Choose a movie or series that you already like, put the subtitles in English, and focus on the words and phrases that appear. Listen carefully to how the characters speak. Try to imitate their intonations and expressions. You will see that, over time, the words begin to stick naturally. Also, don't forget the songs. They are an excellent way to learn English in a more relaxed way. Song lyrics often feature colloquial vocabulary, slang, and expressions that you probably wouldn't find in books. And the best part, you can sing along. This helps improve pronunciation and fluency in a fun and stress-free way. Now that you understand the power of immersion and how entertainment can be an ally in learning English, it's time to put all of this into practice. It may seem a little strange at first, but believe me, learning English by watching your favorite content not only works, it is one of the most effective and natural ways to absorb the language. First, let's talk about how you can start applying this technique in your daily life without having to change your routine or spend hours on something that isn't fun. It doesn't matter if you already have some level of English or if you're starting from scratch. These tips will help you make the most of what you already consume in English. Let's go. Choose the right content. The first thing to do is choose the right content. And no, you don't have to watch films and series that are super difficult or that you don't like just because they're in English. The idea is to use something you already consume, something you are familiar with, to start the immersion process more smoothly and without pressure. If you love a comedy series like Friends or The Office, great. This is content full of natural and colloquial dialogues that will help you learn everyday words and expressions. If you are a fan of action or fantasy films, such as Avengers or Harry Potter, there is also a lot of useful vocabulary in these options, even if some expressions may be more specific. For beginners, I recommend starting with something simple and lightweight. Children's series or TV shows more aimed at young audiences, such as Stranger Things or The Mandalorian, are an excellent choice. They have accessible language and are still a lot of fun, which helps keep your motivation up. Use English subtitles. One of the biggest secrets to learning English by watching content is the use of subtitles. No, I'm not saying to use subtitles in Portuguese. If you really want to learn, you need to challenge your brain to understand the original language. So, use English subtitles. Even if you don't understand everything at first, they will help you associate the words with what is being said. For example, if you are watching a series and hear the word situation, and then it appears in the subtitles, your brain will automatically associate the word with its meaning. This is a completely natural learning process that is much more effective than memorizing isolated words in a book. At first, it can be challenging trying to keep up with what is being said and read the subtitles at the same time. But over time, it will become easier and easier, and you will start to understand more words and phrases. And best of all, you will start to internalize the expressions and words that are used in everyday context, which is much more useful than just studying grammar rules. Imitate what you hear. One of the best ways to improve your pronunciation and fluency is to imitate what you hear. This may seem a little strange at first, but if you think about it as just practicing, you'll realize how quickly it will help you improve. When you watch a movie or series and hear a character saying something, try repeating it out loud. Pay attention to their pronunciation, intonation, and even the way they speak. For example, if a character says, "I can't believe it," repeat that phrase with the same emotion and energy. This will help you improve your pronunciation skills because you are listening to a native speaker and trying to imitate him exactly. This will give you a huge advantage because you will learn to speak more naturally without that forced accent. Furthermore, when you imitate the character's lines, you also start to learn idiomatic expressions and slang. These are the words and phrases you won't find in grammar books, but are essential to sounding authentic when you speak. In spoken English, much of what is said is not formal and words are often contracted, which is something you will only learn by listening to natives. Increase difficulty gradually as you feel more comfortable with the content in English. Start increasing the difficulty. This doesn't mean watching movies that you don't like or that are overly difficult. The trick here is to start adding different types of content. For example, after watching a comedy series, you might try a more dramatic series or a documentary. This will expand your vocabulary and help you adapt to different contexts and speaking styles. You can also start watching content that is a little faster, like YouTube videos or podcasts in English. They are great for improving listening comprehension because people generally speak faster and more fluently. If you don't understand everything, don't worry. The goal here is to practice listening and get used to the different rhythms and accents of English. Practice English in different areas. One of the biggest advantages of learning English through entertainment is that you can learn the language in different contexts. For example, if you are a fan of games, you can start playing in English. Many games offer dialogues and missions with vocabulary that you won't find in English books, but which are very useful when you are chatting informally. Also, if you like music, as I mentioned before, singing your favorite songs in English is also excellent practice. You will learn emotional expressions, commonly used words, and you will also train your fluency. Music is a fun and effective way to integrate English into your daily life without feeling like you are studying. Finally, if you like reading, start reading books, blogs, or articles in English. This will help you increase your vocabulary and become familiar with the structure of the language. If you find it difficult at first, start with simpler books, such as comics or children's books. Little by little, you will feel more comfortable and start reading more complex texts. Reviewing and tracking progress. Last but not least, it is essential to track your progress. As you watch more content and begin to understand more, take time to reflect on how much you've learned. Make notes of the new words you learn. Try using them in conversations, or even write short texts using these words. Constant practice is what will make you evolve in learning, even if you don't realize it. With each episode of a series or song you listen to, you are getting closer to fluency in the language. Over time, you will realize that you are thinking in English naturally, and this will be the true proof of your progress. You already understand how to put learning English into practice in a fun and stress-free way. It's time to talk about the real benefits of this approach. When you learn English through immersion and entertainment, the process becomes much more fluid, natural, and, best of all, sustainable. And I'm not just talking about learning faster, but about acquiring lasting and practical skills, which will really make a difference in your daily life. Faster and efficient learning. If you've ever tried to learn English through traditional methods, you know how frustrating it can be to see slow progress. But when you immerse yourself in English through films, series, music, and other content, something incredible happens. Your brain starts to make connections more effectively. This type of learning is more intuitive because it is directly linked to real-world situations and contexts. When watching a series, for example, you are not just learning single words, but you are absorbing phrases and expressions that are used on a daily basis. This speeds up the process of understanding and application because you quickly begin to perceive words in different contexts. One of the biggest benefits of this approach is that English becomes part of your everyday life. Instead of forcing yourself to study for hours, you begin to experience the language constantly, to the point where you don't even realize you're learning. And the most interesting thing, when you learn naturally, you gain better listening comprehension and more accurate pronunciation, as you are immersed in the language in its most authentic form. Improved listening comprehension and pronunciation. Many people who study English traditionally end up having difficulties with listening comprehension and pronunciation. This happens because everyday English is much faster, more informal, and full of slang than what you learn from books. Have you ever tried to understand a conversation between native English speakers and felt lost? Well, the difference between English in a book and English in real life is huge. When watching films and series, you expose yourself to exactly this type of fast and fluid English. This means that, sooner or later, you will start to understand fast speeches better and even pick up different accents, which can be a big challenge for those who learn English formally. Imitating the characters' lines, as I said before, will also improve your pronunciation. By paying attention to intonation, rhythm, and even the pronunciation of words, you will begin to speak English in a much more natural way, without that forced accent of someone who has learned rules and more rules, without even knowing how to express themselves like a native. And the secret here is to practice. The more you expose yourself to real English, the easier it becomes to understand the nuances of the language. Constant practice is the key to fluency. Increases confidence in speaking. You must have already felt that fear of making mistakes when speaking English, right? The feeling of being out of place or afraid of not being understood. This happens to many people who learn English formally, where the pressure to get it right is constant. But when you learn English naturally, this anxiety disappears. Why? Because you are already familiar with the words and expressions you are using. There is no rush to speak perfectly. You're just practicing what you've heard, what's familiar and comfortable. This confidence comes from constant exposure to the language, whether listening to music, watching series, or playing games. When you learn this way, you understand more quickly and, consequently, begin to express yourself more fluidly. And most importantly, you start to feel less afraid of making mistakes, because you are allowing yourself to learn from your mistakes, which is fundamental in any learning process. You will notice that, over time, English begins to flow naturally. There is no rush, there is no pressure. You feel more at ease because you are really connecting with the language in a way that doesn't involve boring formulas or rules. Everything starts to make sense, and confidence comes as a consequence of your genuine engagement with the language. Diversified and contextualized learning. Another incredible benefit of learning English through entertainment is the diversification of learning. It's not just about learning an isolated word or expression, but about understanding the context in which it is used. This gives you a much richer understanding of the language and allows you to apply what you've learned more effectively. For example, imagine that you learned the word awesome by watching a series. Instead of just knowing that the word means amazing, you come to understand how it is used in informal situations, with the emotion and intention that a native speaker would give to that word. This prepares you to use it in the most natural way possible, since you learned it in its real context. Furthermore, when you watch series and films of different genres, you begin to see how English is used in various situations, from the relaxed context of a comedy to the formal conversations of a drama. This variety of contexts will enrich your vocabulary and prepare you to communicate more fluidly in different environments. Less fatigue and more motivation. Learning English this way is not only more enjoyable, but also less tiring. Instead of forcing yourself to study grammar and memorize words on flashcards, you're learning while having fun with content you already love. This eliminates the feeling of effort that many feel when learning in a traditional way. When learning becomes something you do fun and without realizing it, motivation is kept high. With each new episode of your favorite series or song you listen to, you feel like you're getting closer to fluency, and that's extremely rewarding. Unlike traditional methods, which often generate frustration, this approach keeps the learning process light and enjoyable. Long-lasting and sustainable results, and best of all, the results you achieve with this approach tend to be long-lasting and sustainable. Natural learning, without the pressure of grammar, rules, or time tests, creates a genuine connection with the language. This means that you will never forget what you learned in the same way that you forget what you learned in a grammar book. Because the learning was experienced, it was integrated into your daily life. By watching content in English and understanding the words in a real context, your brain creates strong and meaningful memories. This helps to keep learning consistent, as it is not a boring or forced task. You are learning because you want to, and this results in a more natural and lasting mastery of the language. With everything we've discussed so far, you may be wondering, but does it really work? Is learning English just by watching movies, series, and listening to music enough? I completely understand this doubt. After all, we are talking about a method that may seem radical to those who are used to the traditional idea of studying grammar, making vocabulary lists, and following the step-by-step instructions of a textbook. The good news is that yes, this method works, and I will explain exactly how and why it is so effective, bringing data, studies, and real examples so you understand that, when done right, learning English by immersing yourself in entertainment can be one of the fastest and most natural ways to achieve fluency. The power of continuous exposure. When you learn English the traditional way, what you are essentially doing is memorizing words and rules. You are not learning the language in a contextual way, which is why, often, when you try to speak English or understand something spoken, you feel lost. This is because, in the traditional method, the focus is often on artificial learning systems, such as excessive use of grammar and direct translation, without considering the reality of language use. Now, immersion is a completely different approach. It involves continuous exposure to the language in a natural context, without forcing the brain to follow grammatical rules. Imagine this. When you are a child, you learn your mother tongue by listening to the people around you. This is basically what happens when you learn English through series, films, music, and other content in English. By being constantly exposed to the language, your brain begins to absorb English without needing translation. He understands what is happening because the human brain is incredibly adaptable and begins to make intuitive associations with what is being said. Continuous exposure to the language brings quick and consistent results. Because learning happens naturally, it's not something forced. With each film you watch, each series you watch, your brain begins to understand more and more, creating deep and lasting memories that will facilitate your learning. You're not just memorizing words, you're immersing yourself in the real context in which English is spoken. Support for scientific studies now. You may be wondering, not only is this a cool theory, but is there any scientific basis that proves this method actually works? The answer is yes. Several studies prove the effectiveness of immersion for language learning. For example, linguist Stephen Krishnan, one of the biggest proponents of immersion theory, explains that learning a language occurs most efficiently when you are exposed to it at a level slightly above your current proficiency. In other words, exposure to English content that is a little challenging but still understandable is exactly what your brain needs to learn naturally. Krishnan calls this input understanding. When you are exposed to information that is understandable but still presents a challenge, this type of language exposure is more effective than traditional teaching because you don't have to worry about memorizing rules. You simply learn by listening, understanding, and engaging with the language. Additionally, research from other studies, such as one conducted by the Institute of Education in the United Kingdom, has shown that using authentic content such as videos, music, films, and real conversations is significantly more effective than traditional teaching methods that rely on focus only on memorization. The scientific evidence is clear. The immersion method works more effectively because the brain learns the language in the same way it learns its mother tongue. Real success stories, but, of course, theory is one thing, and practical results are another. So, to really make it clear that learning English through entertainment is possible and effective, let's look at real cases of people who used this method and were successful. Philip's case, Philippe always hated the idea of studying English in a traditional way. He tried several methods, such as formal classes and grammar books, but nothing seemed to work. When he started watching series and films in English, he initially didn't understand much, but he continued watching with subtitles and repeating the lines. Little by little, he realized that he was beginning to understand more, and, over time, he began to speak more fluently. He reports that the biggest benefit of learning English this way was that he began to think in English naturally, without having to mentally translate. Today, he is fluent in the language, and it all started with a simple habit of watching his favorite films and series in English. Mariana's case, Mariana, on the other hand, was always afraid of speaking English. She thought she wouldn't be able to communicate because she didn't have perfect grammar. But, as she started listening to music and watching YouTube videos about her favorite topics, she began to get used to the language in a much lighter way. She began to realize that she didn't need to be perfect, but practical. Over time, she gained confidence in speaking, and today she is increasingly comfortable with English. These are just two examples of real people who have changed the way they learn languages. And, as you can see, the immersion method has been a huge success. By perceiving English in a natural and immersive way, they connected with the language in a much more authentic way, making the learning process more fun, less stressful, and much more effective. Demystifying doubt. Is immersion enough? Now, let's talk about the main question that may be running around your mind. Is immersion alone enough to learn English? Can I really put aside the books and still speak fluently? The answer is yes and no. Immersion alone does not mean that you will learn 100% of the vocabulary or grammatical rules of a language. However, it provides the solid foundation you need to become fluent. With immersion, you acquire a solid foundation in understanding and speaking. And when you combine this with complementary practices, like talking to native speakers or doing some simple grammar review, you reach fluency much faster and more naturally. It's not about completely abandoning traditional methods, but about integrating dynamic practices that make learning more effective. In short, immersion gives you the ability to think and understand quickly, while studying grammar can be used to reinforce and correct details you may need. When you start learning English immersively, one of the first changes you'll notice is that instead of feeling like you're studying the language, you start to flow with it. The process becomes more organic, more natural, as if English was already part of you. This transformation does not happen overnight, but with continuous practice and exposure to the language, it happens gradually and almost imperceptibly. At first, you may even feel a little insecure when trying to understand the dialogues or repeating phrases you heard in a series or song. But as you become more and more involved with English, something magical happens. The language begins to enter your daily life so naturally that you start to think about it without having to force it. From effort to naturalness, remember when you started learning English? Maybe it was a little challenging to understand even the simplest words. The phrases sounded too fast, and as much as you struggled, it seemed difficult to understand the real meaning of what was being said. Now imagine how it is when you start watching a series or movie in English, and instead of having to translate everything into your head, you already understand what is happening and begin to realize nuances that once went unnoticed. You may not understand all the words, but can already capture the general context and the key expressions. This is the transformation into action. Over time, you start thinking faster in English, and there is no need to mentally translate words. They simply appear. The brain begins to react automatically to the language, as if flowing instinctively, effortlessly. And to achieve this transformation, the key is in constant exposure. When you watch more movies and series, you hear more songs and get involved with more English content, your brain begins to organize information intuitively. It no longer needs translation, because understanding becomes natural and immediate. Overcoming the barriers of anxiety, something that many face when learning English is anxiety, the fear of making mistakes when speaking or not being understood. Who has never felt caught when trying to speak English for thinking it is not ready? This is completely normal and part of the learning process. However, by learning English immersively, this fear begins to disappear. Imagine yourself watching a series with English subtitles. You begin to realize that even though you don't understand 100% of what is said, you can still follow the story and capture the feeling of the scenes. This is already a great victory, and by doing so repeatedly, your brain gets used to being emotionally involved with the language, to the point that you no longer realize the barrier between English and your mother tongue. The confidence you get to understand more and more than you watch is something that directly translates to your ability to speak. And when you finally try to speak, instead of feeling anxious or insecure, you feel that you already have the necessary tools to express yourself. This emotional and psychological liberation is a fundamental part of transformation in the learning process. The impact of expressions and slang on their vocabulary. One of the greatest barriers who learns English in a traditional way faces is the formal vocabulary. In the classroom, you learn words and phrases like "how are you?" and "I am fine," which, although essential, do not reflect how people really communicate on a daily basis. Therefore, often when trying to talk to natives, you feel out of place, as if using older or excessively formal English. By immersing English through entertainment, you learn real expressions and slang people use in everyday conversations. When watching a series like Friends, for example, you learn how to ask questions and express feelings naturally. It's no longer about using formal phrases, but understanding how people really talk. This allows you to feel more connected to the language because it starts talking like a native. You start using everyday expressions like "what's up" or "I'm good, thanks," and they sound more natural than the formal sentences you have learned before. Your vocabulary becomes richer and more authentic, helping you express yourself better and sound more fluent. Thinking of English, the turn to fluency. One of the biggest victories in the process of learning a new language is starting to think about it. When you finally reach a point where English is already a natural part of your thinking, it means that you have really dominated the language. It is no longer necessary to translate mentally. You begin to directly associate what you see and hear in English with your reality without the translation process. This moment of transition may take some time, but when it arrives, you will notice a big difference. You will start thinking about English while watching movies, or while listening to a song, or even while talking to other people. Your brain begins to make fast and intuitive associations, which facilitates fluency and makes communication even more natural. The secret to reaching this point is in constant immersion. The more you practice, the more your brain will absorb English automatically. It starts making the connections effortlessly, and you start thinking about English fluidly. Confidence grows with practice. With constant practice, confidence in your English is increasing. You begin to realize that no longer does you miss a verb or don't know exactly the meaning of a word, because over time you learn to use the context to fill the gaps. If you don't know what a word means, you can guess your meaning based on what is happening in the scene or conversation. And this is only possible with continuous exposure to the language. Confidence, then, becomes a direct reflection of its immersion and practice. The more you hear, speak, and interact with English, the safer you feel. And with this increase in confidence, fluency comes organically. There is no more hurry or need to decorate complex phrases. You simply speak because English is already a part of you. Now that you understand the power of immersion and how entertainment can be an effective tool for learning English naturally, it's time to bring your learning to a new level. In this chapter, we will explore advanced strategies that will help you maximize the impact of the content you are already consuming and accelerate your progress. These tips are aimed at those who have started to incorporate English in everyday life, but want to refine their skills and make learning more effective and fun. If you are already watching movies and series, listening to music and playing games in English, these strategies will help you enjoy this process even more. Vary the type of content when you start learning English. It can be tempting to focus only on one type of content, perhaps a specific series or a kind of music you love. But to evolve faster and make your English more versatile, it is important to vary the type of content you consume. Diversity in content will expose you to different contexts, vocabularies, and even ways of speaking. For example, in addition to series and movies, try to include podcasts, audiobooks, and English documentaries. Each of these formats offers different forms of vocabulary and speech. Podcasts, for example, are great for learning English spoken quickly and casually, while audiobooks can help you get used to more formal English and expand your vocabulary more deeply. If you like specific topics such as history, science, or business, seek materials aimed at these areas. Listen to lectures, see documentaries, or read articles in English. Not only will this help you learn new and technical words, but it will also increase auditory understanding in more challenging contexts. Content diversification also allows you to learn expressions that are common in different cultural and professional contexts, which further increases your fluency and trust. Change the speed and pace of content. If you are already watching series and movies in English and feel comfortable, the next step is to increase the challenge. One way to do this is to adjust the reproduction speed of the content. Platforms like YouTube, for example, allow you to accelerate video playback, while on Netflix you can adjust the audio playback speed. This strategy will help you get used to faster dialogues and improve your ability to understand English spoken more agile. At first, it may be difficult to follow the rapid pace, but over time, your brain will adapt to this new challenge, and you will realize that you can understand and follow the conversations faster. It is important to start slowly and increase the speed as you feel comfortable. Start with 1.25x, then increase to 1.5x, and so on. This will increase your ability to process the language faster and improve your fluidity in hearing, understanding. Use subtitles, but don't depend on them. Subtitles are an excellent resource when learning English, but the idea is to use subtitles intelligently. If you watch a movie or series and are still starting, use English subtitles to understand the content. But as you feel more comfortable, try to watch without subtitles or with them off. This is a great exercise to test your auditory understanding. At first, you may not understand everything, and that's normal. The secret is not to despair, but try to understand as much as possible by the context. Over time, you will realize that your brain begins to fill the gaps without subtitles, and this will help you get used to the natural rhythm of English. If you are watching harder content, such as a documentary or a more technical vocabulary movie, you can start watching with subtitles and then turning them off in a second round to see how much you can understand without the visual help of words. Practice spatial repetition, spaced repetition. Another advanced trick to improve your vocabulary is to use the spaced repetition technique, which is a proven method to help memorize information more effectively. Basically, this method involves reviewing words and expressions at specific intervals to ensure that you keep them in long-term memory. For example, if you heard a new word while watching a series, WRITE, that word, and set a time to review it after a day, a week, and then a month. This will help your brain remove words from the short term and store them in long-term memory. You can use apps like Anki or Quizlet, which are designed to help you practice spaced repetition. These apps will show the words you need to review at the right time, and so your vocabulary will expand quickly. Make vocabulary notes and phrases. A simple but powerful way to improve your English is to make notes while watching movies, series, or listens to music. This will help you remember new words and also see how they are used in the correct context. Here is a simple process that you can follow. During the movie or series, write the words or expressions you don't know. Write down the full phrase where the word was used so you can see how it fits the context. After watching the episode or movie, look for the meaning of words and review the phrase they appeared in. Try using these words and phrases in your conversations or even write short stories, using the new expressions you have learned. This active review process is one of the best methods to really learn and retain vocabulary. Practice with friends or natives if you can. Try to interact with people who speak English, either through conversations with friends, tutors, or even language exchange groups. Talking regularly with natives will further increase your fluency and your trust in the language. If you do not know natives in person, you can use apps like Tandem or HelloTalk, which connect people to conversations in the language you are learning. These applications allow you to practice English with native speakers informally and relaxed, which is critical to gaining fluency. Dive into culture. Lastly, one of the most fun parts of learning English is understanding the culture behind the language. This goes far beyond learning words and phrases. Involves understanding humor, customs, cultural references, and accents. When watching movies and series, you are exposing yourself to aspects of the culture of English-speaking countries, and this will help you better understand what people really mean and the intentions behind words. For example, if you love American comedies, you start to understand how English mood works. The jokes, references, and even puns are different from Portuguese. But when you begin to understand culture, English becomes more interesting and fun. Now that you already have all the tools and strategies needed to learn English effectively and fun, the next step is to build sustainable habits that ensure that your learning continues to grow constantly. Learning a language is not something that happens overnight. and it is essential that you create a constant pace of study and practice that is viable and long-term lasting. In this chapter, we will explore how to incorporate English into your daily life simply and practically without overloading your schedule or generating frustration. By establishing healthy and realistic habits, you will be able to maintain English learning as part of your daily life without feeling pressured. Start small and consistent. When we are starting something new, the tendency is to want to do everything at once. Study for several hours, watch content every day, and so on. However, this can generate early exhaustion. The key to sustainable learning is to start small and consistent. Instead of spending hours straight watching videos or reading books in English, start with 20 to 30 minutes a day. It can be watching an episode of your favorite series, listening to a song, or even playing a game in English. The important thing is to make this a daily habit. By starting with shorter and more practical sessions, you will build a solid base without overloading. Over time, you can increase your duration as you feel more comfortable. Consistency is the key here. 20 minutes every day will have much more impact than 2 hours only once a week. This creates a routine where English becomes a natural part of your daily life without being a difficult task. Create a regular study schedule. Another way to ensure that English learning is sustainable is to create a regular study time. Even if you are learning relaxed, such as watching movies or listening to music, having a fixed time for this learning helps to make a commitment to your development. Set a specific time of the day you will devote yourself to English. This can be in the morning while having coffee, or at night, after work or studies. The important thing is to have a specific moment when English becomes its priority at that moment. If you want to combine English learning with other activities, such as exercises or other studies, create a specific block for English. This small organization in your routine will help maintain focus and discipline, as well as ensure that English remains present in your daily life without overloading your other responsibilities. Combine English with its daily activities, an excellent way to ensure that English does not become a boring or exhaustive task is to integrate it into your daily activities. This can be done simply and fun, without requiring much effort or additional time. For example, you can start thinking about English during daily activities. When shopping, try to think about the names of the products in English. When doing homework, try to mentally describe what you are doing using English words. This helps to increase your vocabulary and get used to the language naturally. Another way is to incorporate English into your leisure. You can watch movies or listen to music while performing activities such as cooking, exercising, or even during the way for work or school. These small changes in your daily life will ensure that you keep practicing English without overloading your routine. Stay motivated with realistic goals. A big mistake that many make when trying to learn something new is to set unrealistic goals. In the beginning, it may seem tempting to set a goal as learn fluent English in 6 months. But the truth is that fluency takes time and continuous practice. Instead of focusing on a very large and distant goal, start with smaller and realistic goals. For example, you may have the goal of watching an episode of an English series without subtitles in a week, or learn 5 new words or expressions every day. These smaller goals are much more achievable and will keep you motivated to continue. When you reach a goal, however small, it creates a sense of achievement and reward, which strengthens your motivation to continue. Also, when you set goals that are small and achievable, learning does not seem so intimidating or overloaded. Vary the form of study and maintain the fun. If you want to ensure that your English learning is sustainable, one of the most important things is to keep the process fun. The key to maintaining high motivation is to vary the way you learn so that English never becomes monotonous or tiring. In addition to watching movies and series, you can explore other learning methods that involve interactivity, such as playing English games, participating in conversation challenges with native speakers, or even using language apps. Diversifying forms of learning will not only keep the process more interesting, but will also expose you to different aspects of language, making your fluency more complete. Another trick is to incorporate gamification into your learning. This can be done through language apps, online games, or even creating challenges for yourself, such as trying to use a new expression you have learned during the day or maintain an entire English conversation. When learning becomes a game, it becomes lighter and more engaging, which is ideal for maintaining its motivation. Give yourself space for errors. Fear of making mistakes is one of the biggest barriers for those who learn a new language. But in English learning, making mistakes is a fundamental part of the process. When you make a mistake, you are simply testing your understanding and, in doing so, is really learning. It is important to give yourself the permission to make mistakes and understand that this is part of the journey to fluency. Each error is an opportunity to learn and improve. By eliminating the pressure of being perfect, learning becomes much lighter and you can evolve continuously. Celebrate your achievements as you advance English learning. It is crucial to celebrate small victories along the way. This can include simple things, such as completing an episode without subtitles or understanding a complete conversation. Recognizing these achievements helps to reinforce your commitment to learning and maintains your high motivation. You can also use these celebrations as a form of reward. When you reach a goal, for example, you can reward yourself with something you like, such as a day of rest, a trip to the movies, or even an extra episode of your favorite English series. We have reached the end of this journey and, over the last chapters, you have learned that the most natural and effective way to learn English is through entertainment immersion. It is no longer necessary to hold on to traditional methods that often make learning tiring and demotivating. By integrating English into your daily life in a fun and engaging way, you are taking steady steps towards fluency. But the journey does not end here. What you have learned so far is just the beginning. Now it's time to put into practice everything we discuss and start reaping the fruits of this new method of learning. Reflect on your learning journey throughout this process. You have learned about the benefits of watching series, movies, listening to music, and even playing games in English. He realized how this form of learning offers a more natural hearing, understanding, improves pronunciation, and puts you in contact with real English, one that is spoken every day in different parts of the world. You understand that constant exposure and content diversification are fundamental to fluency quickly and effectively. Now, the key is to maintain focus and consistency. As we have already argued, learning a new language requires daily practice and patience. But by adopting English as a natural part of your life, the process becomes more enjoyable and less forced. When you learn in a relaxed and fun way, learning becomes part of your daily life, and that speeds up the results. Practice every day, even if it's a little. The beauty of immersive learning is that it does not require endless hours of study. It may be that at first you have to devote more time, but you will soon realize that you are learning and practicing English during various activities in your daily life, whether watching movies, talking to friends, or even mentally describing your actions. The trick is to maintain the constancy. Even if you only have 20 minutes a day, use this time to watch a series, listen to a song, or practice the new vocabulary you have learned. Do not underestimate the power of these little moments. They will accumulate over time and lead you to faster fluency than you might think. Get out of your comfort zone and try new challenges as you evolve in English learning. Challenge yourself to go beyond your current level. If you already feel comfortable watching comedy series, try to watch a documentary or a more dramatic movie. If you already hear pop songs, try to explore other musical genres that bring different vocabulary. This will expand your horizons and make you adapt to different types of English, including technical, formal, and regional English. Also, start talking more. If you are not yet completely comfortable talking, look for opportunities to practice with friends, colleagues, or even English tutors. The simple act of trying to speak will help you put into practice what you have learned and improve your trust. Use the tools to your advantage. You have at your disposal a huge variety of tools that can help you in this process. Apps like Duolingo, Tandem, HelloTalk, and Quizlet are perfect for integrating your daily learning. In addition, platforms like YouTube and Netflix are goldmines for those who want to learn English immersively. Take advantage of these features to the fullest, but always remember that the key is in constancy. Remember that while these tools can be very useful, the most important thing is you. If you are committed to learning English with patience and dedication, there is no limits to what you can achieve. Now it's your turn. Put it into practice now that you have all the strategies, tips, and tools we discussed. It's time to put everything into practice. Get started now. Don't wait for tomorrow. Take the first episode of your favorite series. Put the subtitles in English and pay attention to the vocabulary you don't know yet. Listen to a song in English and try to understand the lyrics. Play a game in English and, most importantly, have fun during the process. The key to success is not giving up and keeping English as a fun and pleasant part of your daily life. Learning should not be a heavy task, but something you look forward to every day. Celebrate each achievement finally. Celebrate their victories, however small. Each time you understand an English phrase without needing the subtitles or use an expression you have learned in a conversation, this is a breakthrough. Each step taken is a step closer to fluency. You now have the tools and knowledge to continue your journey to learn English in a natural and pleasant way. Don't stop here. Keep exploring, practicing, and having fun while learning. Did you like the tips and strategies to learn English in a fun and efficient way? So don't forget to leave your like here. It helps the channel a lot and motivates us to bring even more quality content to you. And if you don't yet subscribed, take the opportunity to apply now and be part of our community of people who are looking for fluency in English, even more on your learning journey. Activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video is aired. Until next time.